Not right now, I wouldn't. Okay, this is from Psychology Today, as you can see, and hopefully you can hear me. And I am going to read this article from Psychology Today to you, for you. Why women with autism so often are misdiagnosed. Why so many suffer through a misdiagnosis. By Robert T. Mueller, PhD. Okay. Key points, if I can get this damn laptop to... I'm cheating and using my laptop. Key points, 42% of women and girls with autism received at least one misdiagnosis before securing an autism diagnosis, one survey found. Though that survey would be to women on the spectrum. Though the reason for female misdiagnosis isn't always clear, women's ability to, quote, camouflage, unquote, autistic characteristics may play a role. I would suggest that it absolutely does. Similarly, women's restrictive and repetitive behaviors, common features of autism, may be less noticeable than men's. Considering social camouflaging, anxiety, sensory overload, and depression could help more women secure needed diagnoses. Okay, pardon me. After 28, I could right now easily segue off into a rant about micro shit, but I won't do it because I've got self-discipline. After 28 years of being, quote, dragged through the system, unquote, Emily Swiatek was finally diagnosed with a form of autism spectrum disorder. For Emily, receiving the diagnosis felt like, quote, coming home to a version of yourself that you have been denied, unquote. Research shows that autism spectrum disorder is more prevalent in males than females by a ratio of 3-to-1. But there is increasing evidence that this gender difference may be slimmer than we think, and that autism symptoms in women and girls are frequently overlooked and misdiagnosed. In an interview with the Trauma and Mental Health Report, Emily explains her frustration with being shuffled from one specialist to another for years without receiving an adequate explanation for her symptoms. Quote, I've been through quite a long journey, being given about 10 mental health diagnoses along the way. It was getting to the point where it felt like I was caught in the middle of a guessing game. I kept coming up against the same response of, we don't really understand. Let's keep throwing labels and see what sticks, unquote. A survey conducted in the United Kingdom by the National Autistic Society found that compared to males, women and girls were more likely to be misdiagnosed, with 42% of females diagnosed with a mental disorder other than autism when first being assessed, as opposed to 30% of males. Emily's experience is not unique. Hannah Belcher, who was diagnosed at 23, shares her experience. Quote, throughout my life, I've been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, bipolar, traits of borderline personality disorder, and ADHD. Some correct and comorbid, some incorrect and misdiagnosed, unquote. There is no clear explanation as to why women with autism are often misdiagnosed. As an aside, actually there is. On other surveys of the medical sciences, women often have to deal with misogyny. Back to the article. Child psychiatrist Meng Chuan Lai, a clinician scientist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, says that while there's a range of different reasons why women receive a diagnosis of ASD later in life, one possibility is that autism characteristics aren't so evident in females. Quote, girls and women may be more able to master camouflaging, so typical autistic characteristics could be masked when they learn social skills, unquote. Lay describes this as the ability to learn neurotypical social behaviors such as eye contact, gestures, holding conversations, and the utilization of social scripts. These neurotypical behaviors represent those who are not on the autism spectrum, in contrast to the neurodiverse behaviors, which refer to differently wired brains and cognitive styles attributed to those on the autism spectrum. In the foreword for Safety Skills for Asperger Women by Leanne Holliday Wiley, Tony Atwood describes this, quote, camouflaging, unquote, phenomenon reporting that young girls mask the symptoms of autism by socializing and interacting with their peers, causing a delay in diagnoses. Both Hannah and Emily attribute mimicking socialization patterns as an important factor. Emily explains, quote, I'm not part of that traditional profile of autism. It never even occurred to anyone who was assessing me that somebody who looks like me, somebody who presents like me, could be autistic because I'm smiley, I'm eloquent, I can probably make eye contact if I have to, even though I don't like it. I'm a very strong mimicker, and that masking and mimicking profile is true for me. I think I very much fit that well-behaved little girl image, very intelligent, liked reading, very quiet. Maybe they'd say I was shy, unquote. Lai notes that another possible reason for the misdiagnosis is that women and girls tend to have restricted and repetitive behaviors that are less likely to be recognized. Quote, the issue is that some of these narrow interests of autism in males, if you only look at the content, are more traditionally male typical, such as trains, dinosaurs, trucks, and they are most easily recognized by clinicians because of our own stereotypes. Pardon me. Because of our own stereotypes of autism. For girls, their restricted and repetitive behaviors might not be captured by standardized instruments as they are deemed as less noticeable, unquote. Recent research has touched on the idea of bias in the way autism is diagnosed. One study showed that girls are more likely to be diagnosed if they had additional intellectual disabilities or behavioral issues. However, without these, many women are receiving incorrect diagnoses or none at all. Hannah agrees, quote, sometimes you might feel like you don't fit in anywhere. Everything everyone thinks about autism is male biased. However, as slow and painful as the journey is, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. It takes us a little bit longer to get to it, but it's worth the journey, unquote. In a study looking at sex differences between children with autism, researchers recommend new strategies for improving autism recognition in females. In fact, Australia is the first country to form new national guidelines to help increase early diagnosis of women with autism. Considerations of social camouflaging, anxiety, sensory overload, and depression are being included in these new guidelines. If these guidelines are implemented, it will be possible to decrease the number of misdiagnoses in women and girls who have autism, leading to less frustration for these women and more time to learn how to manage their diagnoses. Emily says that since she received her diagnosis, her life has changed for the better. Quote, it was instant relief the minute I got my diagnosis. It just made sense. It was right. It was instantaneous, the difference it made. My general well-being just went up and up and up, and is still on an upward trajectory, unquote. Lucia Chiara Limani, contributing writer, The Trauma and Mental Health Report. Copyright owned by Robert T. Mueller. No, not that Mueller, this Mueller. Yes. Okay, there you go. So that's, I don't generally like to editorialize, but I will, in this case, and say that much of what they're saying in this article is absolutely dead on. It's a bullseye in many ways. But this is a, a lot of people just don't know, like when they used to call it Asperger's, and some people still do, but that's kind of a dated phrase. The test was, it's not like it was consciously, let's cut the women out of the picture kind of thing. It's just kind of like how some people are programmed to think, or they just, the data that they're putting together, they're very focused on that, and they don't see external data sometimes. There could be there's just all sorts, a myriad of influences on why people might be misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all by their doctors and such. There's a lot of doctors that are, they're not specialists in this kind of thing. as far as I know, there's no real test for it, but there's tests that rule it out. Like you can go take there's a neuropsychiatric test that lasts about 3 hours if you suspect that you have autism. You have to ask for a recommendation or something like that. They send you to a shrink. You take a neuropsychiatric test, and that's to rule other stuff out, because ADHD and depression can be a feature of this disorder as kind of comorbid symptoms, and that could be all that somebody is dealing with, but they wind up getting maybe misdiagnosed as autistic when really they're just dealing with depression and anxiety. And, so it's kind of important that whoever the diagnostic person is that they're expert in what they do. But there's so few of them that a lot of people are still just like, they don't have, any way to the diagnoses. And like this article says, it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people, because like the last thing you're going to think about yourself, right, is like you're autistic or something like that, necessarily. So anyway, some people that are, they wind up slipping under the medical radar. They don't get diagnosed, and then they wind up kind of fumbling a lot through life, trying to fit in, not able to, trying to accomplish, not quite getting there. There's of course there's other things that people deal with that can cause that kind of a thing, like drug addiction or alcohol addiction or something like that. But and the other thing that I would suggest that people keep in mind, you have to remember that when people are born into families, that there are kids born into families, kids with disabilities that are born into families that will abuse them because they have the disability. There's a lot of parents that take having a kid with challenges very personally on their egos. They may not have been raised or parented very well. So it's bad enough when a neurotypical kid gets abused, but when you've got kids that aren't neurotypical, that are born into abusive environments, you're not going to get an adult, okay, who is your ideal person. You're going to get people who have burdens and struggles and have to struggle with them, and you can mock them for that if you feel like you need to. I think it makes you look like a piece of shit, personally, when you do. But anyway, I'm not trying to, poster girl here or anything like that. I'm just suggesting that people understand this is a real disorder, and it has real impacts on people's lives. And they aren't impacts that are things that can be, controlled in the sense of, well, if I just get to the source of this problem and fix it, then I won't have those problems anymore. With some of this stuff, it's not fixable. Medicine doesn't always cure. One of the other things that medical science does is treat. Sometimes all you can do is treat the symptoms of a condition and care for it rather than cure it. So people on the spectrum, in my personal opinion, they deserve to know they're on the spectrum, and it's not anything that they can control. It's something that you are hardwired with. It's nothing to feel guilty about. It's no reason to shame people for it. It's ridiculous. It would be like shaming somebody for having a heart condition. You're going to shame people for having a brain condition? Absurd. Utterly absurd. All right, gotta go. Things to do. You guys take it easy, And if there's any topic you want me to read up on or comment on, I may or may not do it. This is just something I'm doing lately for myself mostly, is the reading out loud. But I do try to pick topics that are, that might be interesting to people. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. I'm not a mind reader, so I kind of have to just go with my own mind. Anyway, you guys take it easy, and I'll try to be around more, but my free time is so incredibly limited, it's crazy. All right, see ya.